As usual, the Republican spin is a lot of lies. The worst lie being that there is no difference between the two parties. They say this to try to justify their wrongdoing and to disenfranchise those who might cast a Democratic vote. Like most things Republican, it just isn't true. The Republicans have shown their true colors over attempts to revive the economy. It is as if they want the crisis to grow, thinking that it will help them somehow come the next election. The following should give you a good idea which party is really on your side.
And they described to me what life is like when you lose that $250 a week check and you're out of work. First, you exhaust your savings, and then you start putting off paying bills, and you pray to God you don't get sick because you lost your health insurance. And then comes the day of reckoning. One lady called me and said they're cutting off my gas to my home and the electricity's next. And then another said, I'm 1 month away from moving out of my little efficiency into my car. That's where I'm going to have to live. That is the reality of life. And while these people are looking for work, imagine, if you will, those burdens, which anyone facing them would be preoccupied by them, and at the same time trying to dress up nicely, put on a happy face, fill out the forms, and find a job. I asked the senator from Michigan, what are you finding about these people who've been cut off because of the Republican filibuster from basic unemployment benefits?
Well, you're exactly right. And I also hear, on top of that, about people who've done what we told them they should do. They should go back to school. They should go back and get retraining. So they go back, and the only reason they can actually afford to go back to school, and they're going through one of the job training programs, is that small check that's allowed them to have a little bit of income for their family while they go back to school to do what we've all told them they should do, which is to get a different skill, to go into a different career, and hope that there will be a job there. And I've had so many emails from people, not only about losing their home or about what's happened to their family, but saying, I've had to drop out of school. How does that make any sense when we're trying to make sure that people are productive in the workforce and are able to find a job, that people are dropping out of school because of this as well?
Let me ask this question to the senator from Michigan through the chair. Now, I've heard an argument at the other side of the aisle that says these checks make people lazy. They don't go out and look for work. Getting $250 a week, take it easy. These aren't the people I'm talking to in Illinois. I'd ask the senator from Michigan, who sees thousands of people who've been out of work for long periods of time, what she thinks about this Republican argument that unemployment checks make people lazy.
Well, people in Michigan are very offended by this, extremely offended by this, and I'm very offended on their behalf. The people that we're talking about have never been out of work before in their lives. They're mortified. The idea of having to go get food assistance is unbelievable to them. I mean, these are people that built America. They built the middle class. It is not their fault that Wall Street had the crisis, and we just had the good fortune to be with the president signing a bill that will change that, but it's not their fault what happened. It's not their fault that there was recklessness on Wall Street and then the financial system collapsed and small businesses can't get loans and manufacturers can't get loans. It's not their fault that we went through a decade of policies in the previous administration not enforcing trade laws so their jobs went overseas. I mean, it's not their fault that they find themselves in this economy. And so they're saying to me, I want to work. Hey, I want a job. I don't want to extend unemployment benefits. Give me a job. And that's what we're focusing on, too. And I would say to the distinguished senator that one of the things I find doubly insulting about wasting all this time is the bill we're trying to get to is a small business bill that will help small businesses be able to get loans to be able to hire people. So we're trying to create jobs, and instead all this time is being wasted on an effort just to try to help people get through.
I'd ask the senator from Michigan through the chair, let's get to the hot button issue, the deficit. Because every Republican that comes to the floor and tries to explain why we should change the rules when it comes to unemployment compensation, why we should deny to millions of Americans that basic unemployment check to get by while they're out of work, say it's all about the deficit. I'd ask the senator from Michigan if she would reflect on the fact that many of the same Republican senators making that argument were senators who, when they had a chance under the previous president, added to our deficit by waging 2 wars without paying for them, added to our deficit by giving tax cuts to the wealthiest people in America without paying for them, and in fact doubled the debt of the United States of America in 8 years of time with that economic policy and those decisions. These same Republican senators, like Senator Kyle of Arizona, is arguing that if we give more tax cuts to the wealthy people in America and take that money out of the Treasury and add to the deficit, it doesn't count, because tax cuts for wealthy people don't count when it comes to this deficit discipline that they want. I asked the senator from Michigan, how do you reconcile this? That all of a sudden now this is all about a deficit which the Republican senators virtually ignored for 8 years while we reach the stage that we're in today.
Well, the senator is absolutely correct. That's the fundamental question. And it really goes to a question of values and priorities. I would start out by saying we will never get out of deficit with over 15 million people out of work. And that doesn't even count people who are working 2 or 3 part-time jobs or underemployed. If people aren't back to work, aren't able to purchase as consumers, aren't able to contribute, we will never get out of deficit, which is why we start with jobs in the beginning. But to add insult to injury, then to hear that if we're going to give another round to the only part of the American public that has dramatically increased their income, which are those at the very, very top 1% to 2%, that somehow giving them another tax cut it doesn't matter if it adds to the debt. Adding to the debt for tax cuts for wealthy people doesn't count. But changing the rules, like we've never done before, and focusing on helping out of work people, that counts. That counts. We can't do that if it's somebody who's out of work. But we don't worry at all about deficits when it's helping the privileged few. And I can't imagine how in the world that's not the America that I know and that the majority of Americans care about right now.
I would say to the senator from Michigan, by way of question and close here, that it would seem to me that if a person unemployed who doesn't get the basic check they need to survive is forced to live in their car, that's a more compelling argument to me than giving a tax break to someone who needs to buy a newer car. And that's what is being argued on the other side of the aisle. It is a complete mismatch of priorities. And what I struggle with is the notion of how many times you and I have been called on as members of the House and Senate to stand by some part of America that is struggling. Farmers who are struggling because of drought or flood. People who are victims of flood and tornado. Our friends in the Gulf of Mexico whose lives are changed because of BP. How many times we have said, as an American family, we stand together. And when it comes to something as basic as food on the table and utility bills for the poorest people in America because they're out of work, when there are 5 unemployed people for every available job, why in the world our Republican friends want to take it out on them at this point in time, I don't understand. If there's anything this Congress should do, it's to rally behind those who've lost their job and worry about losing their jobs, those working part-time that you just referenced to, who want to work full-time. And if we can't stand together as a Senate behind those families, I think we have lost something very basic. And I know I had to put that in the form of the question, and I'm just going to hazard a guess. Do you agree?
Well, I absolutely agree, and I want to thank the senator for his continuing leadership and passion on this issue. And I would simply say, Madam President, if over 15 million people out of work in this country isn't an emergency, I don't know what is. And those are the folks that we are fighting for right now. The people that want to work, the people that have been part of this great middle class in our country, who now find that slipping through their fingers because of a global economy where we've not understood what we need to do to make sure the rules are fair, where policies have been put into place that affect only the privileged few with the theory that it'll trickle down to everybody else. And you know what? I wish it had. Madam President, I wish the policies of the former president and my friends on the other side, I wish it had worked. I don't want people to be out of work. If trickle-down economics would work, I'd celebrate it. But my folks are still waiting for the trickle-down. They're still waiting. Yeah, and instead what's happening to them is they've lost their job, or they are finding themselves with fewer hours. Or they're finding themselves in a situation where they're working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, just trying to hold it together. I mean, I've seen numbers that show that almost half the families in Michigan have somebody in their immediate family who's lost their job. And the idea of saying that somehow that's all because people are lazy, I won't say the words I'd really like to say, but I'll just say that's a bunch of bunk.